I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, who is a friend and a colleague of mine over the last 10 years since I've had the honor and privilege of knowing her. She's none other than Dr. Nassim Rouhani, who is a consultant pediatrician working here in London. She works specifically with children, adolescents, and families for issues such as attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, developmental and behavioral concerns, which, as you may or may not be aware of, has been growing exponentially among the younger generation, and which has been a cause and is continuing to be a cause of grave concern for not only parents, but educators, society, and thinkers at large. And she has a special interest in all of these areas, including pediatric trauma. Dr. Rouhani has received many recognitions for her academic and musical accomplishments, and I wish that we had taken use of that opportunity for you to perform, but we didn't think about it ahead of time. So hopefully at another time she'll be able to perform for us in that capacity. And she has received many awards for her extensive community building efforts over the years. She received her first commendation for her work towards promoting racial justice by none other than the mayor of the city of Toronto when just 10 years old. So you see how she's been active since a very young age in social action and in society building in Canada and beyond. Dr. Rouhani is known internationally for her work in promoting the education and training of children, and has worked in various capacities over the years towards empowering children to find their voice and realize their potential. And Dr. Rouhani has experience of her own with two beautiful children aged 8 and 4 years of age. So I'm very happy to welcome her now to speak with us about the topic of tonight, which is raising resilient children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sepide Tahiri, Dr. Sepi, for that introduction. Dear friends, as Dr. Sepi mentioned, we've known each other for many years, and she is an excellent speaker. And one of my favorite reasons for, my favorite aspects of attending her lectures is that she asks questions and then awards points for the answers. And it's always enjoyable to see how many points each answer is granted or gets bestowed upon. In any case, welcome everyone to this evening's presentation on raising resilient children. Okay, I'd like everyone, oh, actually, I have to put the pointer on. Okay, good, all right. I'd like everyone to take a few moments to start thinking about the following questions. What is it? What is resilience? Why do we want to attain it? Why do we want to raise our children to be resilient? And how do we achieve it? How do we raise our children to be resilient? Would anyone like to tell me in 5 seconds or less what resilience is? No? Okay. Well, in my practice, I often use the analogy of a car. When discussing resilience, we look at shock absorbers. Now imagine you're driving down the road in a really nice, fancy car with awesome shock absorbers. What happens when you drive over a bump? I don't think anyone wants, I was going to ask if anyone wanted to show me, but I can just say, when you're driving over a bump, can you see that on the screen? Kind of like, ooh, okay, a little sound effect there. Now imagine you're driving down the same road in a really old, beat up vehicle with really crummy shock absorbers. Now what happens when you drive over the bump? whiplash, right? So let's leave the question of what it is and ask, why do we want to raise resilient children? Please keep thinking about the many possible answers to this question while I highlight just a few points. So our children can cultivate a healthy self-image, deal with tests and difficulties, overcome disappointment and failure, realize their latent talents and capacities, and be of service to humanity. In my practice, we talk about how every snowflake that falls from the sky is unique. Imagine for a moment with just one snowfall. How many snowflakes fall from the sky? A lot, right? Millions. And each and every one of them is different. No two snowflakes are the same. Each and every single child is also unique. My mom used to say, "You're unique, just like everyone else in the world." Each and every single child, each and every single one of us has been endowed with our own special talents and capacities, and every child has the potential to realize his or her own special talents and capacities to make his or her own unique contribution to the world. So each child can impact the course of humanity uniquely. My son, daughter, and I created the following video clip as part of a much longer presentation for Lewis's class last year.
Just one child can change the world. Just one child.
This image is of a mine. Baha'u'llah says to regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. Regard man as a mine rich in gems of an... Is it not working? Shall I get rid of the pointer?
No, it's good. Somebody's raising their hand. Go ahead.
So rich in gems of inestimable value. So are gems insignificant, cheap, of little value? Children can be likened to gems and possess a great deal of value. Do you want me to get rid of the pointer? No? Okay. So why do we want to raise resilient children? Because children are not empty buckets that we fill spoonful by spoonful with knowledge. Children are gems of inestimable value. They are precious. They may deceptively appear as lumps of coal, though when polished and polished and polished and polished, they then display the brilliance latent within them. Children possess oodles and oodles of potential. Look at this tiny seed. This tiny, seemingly insignificant seed possesses within it the potential to become what? This mighty, beautiful, majestic, strong, resilient tree. There are many Bahá'í writings relating to the care, education, and training of children. Children are often likened to tender plants, and God, the divine gardener. Let's listen to this quotation. So many beautiful quotations liken children to tender plants, and God has been likened to the divine garden. And we can consider that this divine gardener has entrusted us, the parents, to be the earthly gardeners, responsible for what? The care of these tender, precious children. Why? So they grow to become strong, beautiful, fruit-bearing, resilient. Dear friends, this was my beloved mother. Her soul winged its flight to the next world just 2 months ago. On Remembrance Day, she passed away. And within an hour of her passing, news began to spread across the globe. And my father, sister, and I began to receive what would become thousands of calls and messages. Many couldn't even speak. They just sobbed over the phone line. My father, sister, and I grew increasingly astonished at just how many people conveyed to us how profoundly my mother had impacted their lives. We repeatedly heard people say, "You have no idea what your mother did for me. You don't understand. She was with me during my darkest hour. If it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have made it." Many informed us that she remained the only person who continued to check in on them. Some of these people my mom had been looking after for decades, calling them once a week for decades, bringing or sending them birthday gifts, visiting them, taking them to the doctor, going to the hospital where they had their loved ones. So she would sit with their loved ones who she didn't know yet while they went home to take a shower or get something to eat. When I was growing up, back before we had cell phones and caller ID, the phone would ring and I'd pick up the landline. And it would be one of my friends. Only they weren't calling to talk to me. They were calling to talk to my mom. These were my friends, and they were calling to talk to my mother. And my mother called them, went to see them, encouraged them to pursue higher education, found them jobs, lovingly motivated them to aim higher, and lovingly and figuratively kicked them in the rear when they started to falter and needed that push to propel them forwards. So, dear friends, how do we raise resilient children? It starts with showing up. My mother showed up. She showed up to celebrate successes. She was always so happy when anyone achieved. She also showed up when no one else did. Whether or not people had constant contact with her or just one interaction, we all recognized that she was there for us, that she believed in us, that she loved us. At her funeral, a man came up to my sister and I and started talking to us about our mom. Now, right now, this man is tall, he's big, he's got broad shoulders, he's kind, he's intelligent, he has his own children. Though my sister and I have known him since he was very young, small, quick, precocious, and incredibly mischievous. We grew up in Toronto, which has a large Bahá'í community, and there were often gatherings and events where hundreds of people would come together. This little boy was considered a quote-unquote holy terror, and no one could do anything to prevent him from causing the next catastrophe. No one except my mother. For my mother and my mother alone, this quote-unquote hellraiser behaved brilliantly. Trouble, catastrophe, alleviated. At my mother's funeral, this man recalled how when he was a boy, as soon as he would see my mother, he would freeze, as just one of her looks was enough to stop him in his tracks, and he would even start to quiver. This man stated, "I always knew in the core of my being that she loved me a lot, and I did not want to disappoint her." Dear friends, our children need to fear us, not fear our wrath coming down to smite them, but fear disappointing us, because they love us and because they are assured with unfailing certainty that we love them. Baha'u'llah says, "Observe my commandments for the love of my beauty. Observe my commandments for the love of my beauty." Do our children follow our commandments because they love us and do not wish to disappoint us? Do our children know that we love them? Are they assured of this? O son of being, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. I recall an analogy from years ago where the phone is always ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. This is God's love, flowing constantly and endlessly. But unless we pick up the receiver on the other end, God's love can't reach us. O son of being, so this is God talking to us, love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. How do we raise resilient children? We have to make sure the connection is secure. And when there's a dropped call or a hang-up, we have to reestablish that connection as soon as possible. For example, "Johnny, it's time to come cut your hair." "I don't want to cut my hair." That may be love, but you still have to. "I hate you, Mommy." That's okay, Johnny. I love you. I love you 2. I love you 3. I love you forever. After a physical separation or an emotional one. So when your children wake up in the morning, after they've come home from school, after an argument or a tantrum, a little tickle, a little giggle, establish eye contact, elicit a smile or a nod, boom, connected, reconnect. Electronics addiction is a real entity. It's an actual thing. And it is a growing problem of an alarmingly pandemic nature. In my professional experience over the last 2 decades, shouldn't have said that because it betrays my age. Rewind. In my experience, electronics addiction is a huge barrier to achieving resilience. This topic is vast, and we could sit here and discuss just this for the next several days and still have more to explore. For tonight, I'm going to share some images that I would like for you to look at and think about. We're going to start with these 2 here. Look carefully at the pictures. The next several are from cartoonmovement.com from the Digital Addiction Collection. Before we fly in a plane, we're always reminded to first put the oxygen mask on ourselves before attempting to assist others. How do we raise resilient children? We show up and we step up. This means that we shape up and do what needs to be done first ourselves. We don't tell Johnny, be resilient. We teach Johnny how to be resilient by showing Johnny how we are resilient. Say, O brethren, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Say, O brethren, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Johnny, it's time to get off your screens. But Mom, you're on your phone. Say, O brethren, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. Several years ago, I was at the public library with my child, and during story time, a public health nurse came to address the parents and share the public health unit's campaign, Power Off and Play. And as part of this campaign, the health unit was distributing these little pouches. And the idea was that the child could take their parents' devices, put it in the pouch. So why? Their parents would play with them. How do we raise resilient children? We power off and anyone. Play, that's right. How do we raise resilient children? We power off and read. We power off and sing and dance. We power off and sleep. Dear friends, according to one model, resilience is dependent upon two things. Any guesses? Everyone's shy tonight. Two things. You already know, so you can't say. Okay. All right. A resilient child requires confidence and courage. How does a resilient child acquire confidence? According to this model, a resilient child acquires confidence through a strong and healthy attachment relationship with who? Usually the parent. How does a resilient child acquire courage? Encouragement. Dear friends, let's examine courage first. How does a resilient child acquire courage? Encouragement. This video clip is also from the presentation my son Louis prepared for his class last year.
Let's look more closely at helping others. Small acts can have a ripple effect and lead to big outcomes. Just one child can change the world. Just one child!
Small acts lead to big outcomes. This is the power of encouragement. We build on strengths. We empower with constant and continual encouragement. Baha'u'llah says, O people of God, that which traineth the world is justice, for it is upheld by two pillars, reward and punishment. These two pillars are the sources of life to the world. When we encourage our children to act with the hope of attaining rewards and the fear of avoiding punishment, we have to remember one important thing. You can give me a fancy physics equation and tell me I will give you $1 million for solving this equation. Or I will fine you $1 million for not solving this equation. Dear friends, this is not justice. This is not the embodiment of the two pillars of reward and punishment being the source of life to this world. Why? Because in neither scenario do I actually know how to solve this equation. expecting me to hope for a reward or fear a punishment for a task that I have not been provided the necessary skills to tackle is the very essence of injustice. If we wish to raise resilient children, we have to aid them to acquire courage through encouragement. This requires encouraging them to foster the necessary skills needed to be able to scale the walls before them, and being there to give them a boost when they need it. Now, this is important. This includes encouraging our children to discover truth for themselves and then apply that knowledge. This includes encouraging our children to discover truth for themselves and then apply that knowledge. About a decade ago, I was listening to a talk given by Tom Price, and he mentioned reading about a woman working in France during World War I looking after orphans. And never before had the world seen so many orphans. This French woman noted that if you went to a child and told them that their parents had died and they had to go and live in an orphanage, that they would become traumatized and sometimes remain traumatized for life. And then she discovered that if you went to a child and told them a story about other children whose parents had died and they went to live in an orphanage and they were eventually adopted and went on and lived happily ever after, that the child would say, "Oh, is that what happened to me as well?" So this is profoundly striking because it was exactly the same information, was it? One was presented threatening to the person, and one was presented over here and allowed the child to make the transfer of truth. Okay? So Tom decided that with his own kids, he would try to never tell them what they had done wrong directly. And while his children were very young, each night he would tell them a story. And it just so happened that these stories were always about turtles. And it just so happened that whatever his children had done that day, the turtles had done the same wrong thing. Now, Tom described his daughter Juliet to be particularly defiant, strong-willed, yet exceedingly intelligent. And Tom came home one day when Juliet was around 3 and found her crying uncontrollably. Juliet was red-faced, and silently, these tears were just dripping down to the floor. He asked her, "Juliet, what's wrong? What's happened?" And she didn't answer, she was mad. Tried again, "Juliet, what's wrong? What's happened?" And he decided he'd just go and find his wife. He figured she'd done something wrong and her mom had scolded her. Now, what did she do? Tom later found out that his 3-year-old had taken the family's yogurt maker, which produced a lot of yogurt. So she took this yogurt maker into the bathroom and dumped a whole lot of yogurt into the bathtub and proceeded to take a yogurt bath. So anyway, after Tom asked Juliet what's wrong and she wouldn't answer, he said, "Never mind." And he was walking out the door when Juliet said, "Daddy, tell me about the turtles who took a yogurt bath." Dear friends, Tom was shocked that his 3-year-old even understood that this was the game, that she got it. But the point is, she did get it. And she wanted to talk about it, but she didn't want to talk about what she had done. She wanted to talk about what the turtles had done, right? She wanted the truth to be non-threatening, but she still wanted to talk about it. So if we want to raise resilient children, we have to learn how to encourage them to seek truth and help them access it in a way that is non-threatening. A resilient child requires courage. A resilient child also requires confidence. And how does a resilient child acquire confidence? Through a strong and healthy attachment relationship with usually the parent. Now, many studies have explored what we do as parents and how this impacts resilience. For example, breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, daycare versus stay-at-home parenting. Which is better? Which has the better outcome? What do you think? Do you think these decisions have been shown to have an impact on a child's resilience? Well, let me ask you something. Would you leave your 2-year-old home unattended and go off to work? No. Would you starve your kid? No. Dear friends, so long as we actually feed our children and ensure that they are being safely looked after, these types of decisions have not been shown to determine long-term resilience, okay? They have not been shown to impact long-term resilience. Remember, we are the gardeners, entrusted with the care of these tender plants. Why? So they grow to become strong and resilient. We have to feed our children. We have to clothe them. We have to provide shelter. We have to ensure that they learn how to tie their shoes and learn how to read and write. We also have to provide moral and spiritual education. Why? So that our children use the knowledge and skills that they acquire towards being of service to humanity, as opposed to building atomic bombs or finding clever ways to lie and cheat and take advantage of others. So, dear friends, what we do matters. We have to show up and we have to step up. But the exact specifics of what we do is not nearly as important as who we are for our children. Look at this tree. Look at its roots. Are they shallow or deep? Deep. The deeper the roots, the more resilient the tree. Newfield talks about attachment parenting and describes 6 stages that children go through. And it's really roots of attachment that we're looking at. Proximity is an important first stage of attachment. So our infants bond with us via proximity. So skin to skin, touch, contact, closeness. We can see how proximity is a shallow root of attachment when we consider that certain relationships that we have in our lives, they only last as long as proximity exists. So for example, a friendship between classmates that ends once the children are no longer in the same class, or a friendship between workmates that lasts so long as the colleagues work at the same location. These types of relationships are shallow or superficial in nature, okay? Sameness. Around age 2, kids desire to be like us. So if we say, Johnny, eat your vegetables, Johnny may say, no. If we say, okay, if Johnny's way more likely to eat his broccoli, if we say, Johnny, are you going to eat that broccoli so you grow big shoulders, big strong shoulders like your daddy's? Another example is Susie's playing the piano. And a lot of us say, good job, that was nice, something like that. These comments are not all that helpful for building resilience. Yet if we say, oh wow, Susie, I didn't know you were a talented piano player like your mommy. This simple statement builds resilience. Why? Because sameness is a root of attachment. Belonging. When a 3-year-old pushes their sibling off a mom's lap, that's showing you that the child's sense of belonging is being threatened. We want our children to feel assured that they belong, because this sense of loyalty or belonging is generally what drives them to want to do what we ask of them. Significance. By letting our children know how they are special to us, we fortify the sense of closeness between us. Love and being known are the deepest roots of attachment. These are what compel children to share their secrets or tell us their fears. Remember earlier we talked about those superficial relationships, those that were based on proximity? Well, a true connection is independent of time and place. So when there is love and a sense of being known, we can form a strong connection with someone that remains unshakable even after just one meeting or despite not having seen each other for many, many, many years. Remember my mom and the thousands of calls and messages we received? Why? My mother showed up and my mother stepped up, not just for me and my sister, but for everyone. My mother made sure that you knew she loved you, and she made sure to set expectations, and she didn't just tell you what to do, she showed you, she walked along beside you, she accompanied you. She encouraged you and supported you and celebrated your strengths and your achievements and your successes, and lovingly and figuratively kicked you in the rear when you started to go astray. My mother also stood up. She was a true mama bear and stood up for me and for others. My son Louis was just 5 years old when he said to me, "Mommy, an upstander is someone who stands up and doesn't let bad things happen to other people." My mother was an upstander. I recall being in second grade, my teacher had set a reading challenge for the class, and those students who read the most were rewarded with a special treat, a special outing with the teacher to McDonald's. Well, I read and I read and I read. I stayed up after bedtime reading in the bathroom so I could log my reading and be one of the students to win this challenge. My teacher informed me in front of the whole class that I was lying, that I did not read what I had logged, and I did not go to McDonald's. My mom noticed my disheartened spirit, and with her gentle yet persistent way, she eventually discovered the source of my disappointment and my sadness. The following day, my mother came to school with me. She held my hand tightly, and we went to the office. My mom, politely yet firmly, asked for the teacher to be called to the office. My mother informed the principal and the teacher that I had read everything that I had logged. My mother also said to the teacher that if she had a concern with a pupil, that it should be addressed quietly, privately, maintaining the dignity of the student, not by humiliating the student in front of the entire class. And my mother demanded that the teacher apologize to me. Back then, money was pretty tight, and yet I know my mom, she made sacrifices and spared money we did not have to take me herself to McDonald's. Now, dear friends, I was 7 years old in second grade. This was a long time ago. And I, of course, cannot say for certain if my mother's actions impacted my teacher or the school in any meaningful way. From what I perceived, they took in my mom's accent and discounted her just as easily as they had discounted me. I'm pretty sure my mom knew it too. But dear friends, didn't matter. Because my mother's actions were not for the school and they were not for the teacher. My mother's actions were for me. And her actions impacted my world in the most monumental and profound way. When our children try really hard to please, to rise to challenges, and we cut them down, discount them, berate them, punish them for infractions they didn't even commit, this can have a devastating and long-lasting impact on a child's emotional and psychological well-being and utterly destroys resilience. My mother continually reminded me to rely on God, trust in Him, and call Him continually to mind. And she taught me to focus only on what I needed to do to please God, the heck with what anyone and everyone else said or did. It's actually fitting that I chose this picture of my mom and I on this bridge, because many of us are familiar with the parental comeback. If everyone jumped off the bridge, would you? My mother expected me not to jump off the bridge, regardless of what anyone else did, if I was confident that was the right thing to do. And conversely, my mother expected that I would have the courage to jump off that bridge, even if no one else did, if I had determined that that was the right choice to make. So my mother stood up for me because she was an upstander. And when she stood up for me, she showed me that I was significant, that I had value, that I mattered. And she taught me, by standing up for me, how I needed to stand up for myself. She gave me the courage to do so. O Son of Being, this is God talking to us. My love is my stronghold. He that entereth therein is safe and secure, and he that turneth away shall surely stray and perish. O Son of Being, my love is my stronghold. He that entereth therein is safe and secure, and he that turneth away shall surely stray and perish. What is a stronghold or a fortress? I imagine a mighty building with strong, thick walls and windows and doors that no one can break into. If someone wants to hurt us and we go into this fortress, we are safe. Loving God is like being inside a fortress, a stronghold where no one can do us harm, where we are completely protected. We talked earlier about God being the divine gardener and us as parents being called upon to act as the earthly gardeners. Likewise, as we recognize that God's love is like a fortress, the ultimate stronghold, we as parents need to strive to become strongholds for our children. How do we raise resilient children? We ensure that our love is their stronghold. Paulus says, "And be thou so steadfast in my love that thy heart shall not waver, even if the swords of the enemy's rain blows upon thee, and all the heavens and the earth arise against thee. And be thou so steadfast in my love that thy heart shall not waver, even if the swords of the enemy's rain blows upon thee, and all the heavens and the earth arise against thee." Dear friends, when a sword's rain blows upon us, it hurts. And when all the heavens and the earth arise against us, it is overwhelming and terrifying. Our children are struggling. They are turning to drugs and alcohol and electronics. They are being bullied and becoming overwhelmed with depression and anxiety. And they are committing suicide. Our children are struggling because life is difficult. Bring them up to work and strive and accustom them to hardship. Bring them up to work and strive and accustom them to hardship. Tests and difficulties are challenging to face, though undergoing them can lead to our growth. Does anyone know how we purify gold? How do we purify gold? We stick it in the fire. Men who suffer not attain no perfection. Men who suffer not attain no perfection. The plant most pruned by the gardeners is that one which, when the summer comes, will have the most beautiful blossoms and the most abundant fruit. The plant most pruned by the gardeners is that one which, when the summer comes, will have the most beautiful blossoms and the most abundant fruit. We have before us 3 pots of boiling water. Into the first pot, we put some carrots. The second pot, eggs. Coffee beans go into the third pot. When we raise resilient children, we accustom them to hardship so that when faced with life's trials and tribulations, they don't become mushy, limp and soft, and ooze as liquid onto the floor. When we raise resilient children, we accustom them to hardship so that when faced with life's trials and tribulations, they don't become hard and rigid, inflexible, unable to handle the bumps in the road without experiencing whiplash, or indeed refuse to get on the road at all. When we raise children, when we raise resilient children, we accustom them to hardship so that when faced with life's trials and tribulations, they are transformed into a better state. In the simplest of terms, coffee beans, yuck. Richly brewed coffee on a cold winter morning, yum. Okay, now I'm ready to face the day. Armed with the power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me. And with thy love in my heart, all the world's afflictions can in no wise alarm. Armed with the power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me. And with thy love in my heart, all the world's afflictions can in no wise alarm me. Our children become resilient when they learn how to defend themselves from all the blows of the swords and the opposition and attacks they may have to face, such as this one. Many years ago, Dr. Phil and Barbara Coloroso got into a pretty heated disagreement over the root cause of bullying. Dr. Phil stated it was conflict. Barbara Coloroso, the author of The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander, she stated it was contempt. When 2 different individuals attempt to interact or communicate, we expect a certain level of friction or clashing until the 2 achieve a point of agreement or unity. There's a beautiful quotation where Abdu'l-Baha states, "The shining spark of truth cometh forth only after the clash of differing opinions." When agreement or a point of unity is unable to be reached, we can refer to this as conflict. It's important to recognize that conflict demands a certain level of equality. There is an absence of equality with contempt. Bullies do not view their bullied targets as equals. Let's think about this for a moment in terms of war. How do we get soldiers to go out into the battlefields during all these wars and kill others? We don't tell them, here's a gun, go shoot your brother. Or here's a grenade, go blow up your neighbor. In order for these atrocities to be possible, we have historically constructed a rhetoric of us versus them. We dehumanize the other. We refer to them as cockroaches. Let's squash these roaches. We refer to them as rodents. Let's exterminate these rats. My daughter was just 2 years old when she was building forts in the bed with her brother. So they were using all these pillows and sheets and blankets, and there wasn't a whole lot of visibility. Well, she accidentally kicked her brother in the nose, and he said, ow. Really wasn't all that big a deal. He was more surprised than anything else. There was no blood. Yet, my daughter became quite distraught. Again, it was an accident. Yet she felt really badly for having, accident or not, hurt her brother. When someone hurts someone else, we expect a reaction. An expected response could be, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do?" Bullies often remain silent and display either a lack of emotion or enjoyment, not remorse. Indeed, they may feel sorry when they get caught, though they are feeling sorry that they got caught. They are feeling sorry for themselves, not the party they inflicted harm upon. Dear friends, bullies usually intend harm with their actions, not the result of an unintentional accident, which bullies may claim in order to get away with their actions without repercussions. The definition of an accident is an unintended and usually sudden and unexpected event resulting in loss or injury. My daughter kicking her brother in the nose under all those sheets and blankets, that was an accident. Bullying tends to be systematic and very much intentional, not an unintentional accident. And very frequently, when forced to apologize or face accountability for their actions, bullies only get angrier and escalate, blaming the victim and punishing the bullied party for the consequences of their own actions. When we are raising our children, we have to be watchful. Is our child becoming the bully who perpetuates harm? Are we getting funny feelings in the pits of our stomachs because we recognize disturbing characteristics being manifested by our own child? Is our child the bullied target who may later become a bully? Is this why he or she refuses to go to school, claiming stomach aches or headaches, or is unable to pay attention in class? Are we raising our children to be bystanders? Before, bystanders used to stand by and watch and do nothing, or turn their heads away, or egg on the bully. Nowadays, people take out their phones, not to call for help, but to record what's going on. I just discovered that Barbara Coloroso, the author of The Bully, the Bullied, and the Bystander, updated and expanded her book, which is now called The Bully, the Bullied, and the Not So Innocent Bystander. And in this book, she helps identify the not so innocent bystanders as, and I quote, peers or siblings who either watch, participate in the bullying, or look away, and adults who see bullying as teasing, not tormenting, and as boys will be boys, or girl drama, not the predatory aggression that it is. Bahá'u'lláh says the fear of God impelleth man to hold fast to that which is good and shun all evil. The fear of God impelleth man to hold fast to that which is good and shun all evil. Fear ye God, and commit not such deeds as would cause my loved ones on earth to lament. Fear ye God, and commit not such deeds as would cause my loved ones on earth to lament. A bird flies wherever it wants to go. A bird poops wherever it wants. A bird is essentially free. People are not free to do whatever they want as a bird is. If we were all to get into our cars right now and drive wherever and however we wanted, very quickly, none of us would be going anywhere. There would be chaos. We have laws for a reason, and everyone is allowed to enjoy freedom when all of us act in compliance with these laws. There are individuals that believe that they can do whatever they want even when their actions harm others, and even when their actions violate the basic human rights of others. The most dangerous person, in my opinion, is someone without fear, as they act without empathy or remorse, and they have no limits. Dear friends, people die when someone drives through a red light. People die when someone decides to drink and drive. People die when pushed over the edge by cyberbullying. People die at the hands of bullies and bystanders. These are just a few of the faces we will no longer see in this world. In virtually every instance of a bully acting with physical violence against a victim causing fatal injuries, or harassing, stalking, or humiliating victims to a degree that the bullied victim commits suicide, in virtually every instance, clear indicators and signs were present. Often, the victim and or the victim's family exerted extensive efforts to find a way out of what is essentially a living nightmare. Changing schools, moving across town, moving out of town, and even leaving the country. Dear friends, when dealing with cyberbullying, it's really hard to get away from the internet, even if you leave the country. This is Jeffrey, and he left us at the age of 7. Gabriel was 8. Jamal, 9. Isabella, 10. Gio, 11. Mallory and Drake were 12. Rosalie, 13. And Quentin and Devin were 14. When we, as individuals and as a society, do this, and some more of this, and some more of this, and then suddenly something really awful happens, and we jump up and exclaim, "Oh, what a tragedy!" Dear friends, just a couple days before Gabriel ended his life, took his own life at the age of 8, he was knocked unconscious at school, and while laying on the ground unconscious, he was stepped on and kicked. So the biggest tragedy is that these awful situations and outcomes should not be happening at all and are preventable. Raising resilient children requires that we are aware of this and we make sure our children are aware of this, so that instead of perpetuating the problem by doing nothing, or perpetuating the problem by enabling the predators, or perpetuating the problem by becoming the predator, we all become part of the solution. There are only two choices. We can either become part of the problem or part of the solution. I mentioned earlier that my son was just 5 years old when he said to me, "Mommy, an upstander is someone who stands up and doesn't let bad things happen to other people." Bahá'í says, "Ye are all leaves of one tree and the fruits of one branch. Ye are all leaves of one tree and the fruits of one branch." Upstanders recognize the fundamental principle of the oneness of humanity, that we are all one people, one human family. That we are all different and unique, just like every snowflake that falls from the sky. And that we need to celebrate our differences, because our beauty and strength comes from our differences. Just like a garden with many different flowers is more beautiful and more resilient. In summary, why do we raise resilient children? Children are gifts from God entrusted into our care. How do we raise resilient children? We show up, we step up, and we stand up. We love them and become their stronghold. We prepare them to face life's trials and tribulations, their tests and tribulations. We nurture their growth so they become strong, beautiful, and fruit-bearing. We encourage them to act with courage and justice, realize their vast capacities, and share their unique talents with the world. I would like to end this presentation the way that I begin my lengthy consultation appointments with my patients and their families. I always start by asking for their consent to take a snapshot of them smiling. I do this for two reasons. The first reason has to do with memory and how the brain works, and I won't talk about that right now. But the second reason is that when I see someone smiling at me, I feel happy. And Abdu'l-Bahá says, joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness. But when sadness visits us, we become weak. Our strength leaves us. Our comprehension is dim and our intelligence veiled. The actualities of life seem to elude our grasp. The eyes of our spirits fail to discover the sacred mysteries, and we become even as dead beings. Once again, joy gives us wings. In times of joy, our strength is more vital, our intellect keener, and our understanding less clouded. We seem better able to cope with the world and to find our sphere of usefulness. Dear friends, to me, this is the goal. This is the embodiment of resilience. We can all choose to walk through this life, or we can soar. How should we raise resilient children? Joyful. Thank you.
Wow, what can I say? I'm usually not dumbfounded, but right now I am almost dumbfounded. This was undoubtedly one of the best presentations in my recent memory, for sure. Thank you so much, Nassim, for this excellent overview, which was so accessible for everyone. During your talk, I got texts from people who said, thank you for inviting me to this. Thank you for allowing me to join, because it was so accessible, so beautifully done. Your sequence was so logical, wasn't it? And you get at least 95 points, many more than at least, multiple, several times 95, 5 times 95 points to do you for a very, very long time. Thank you also for incorporating your musical talent into this in such an artistic way. Nassim and her whole family are such incredibly talented artists at the same time. And the way you conveyed this really serious and deep subject to us in a short period of time, in an hour, so logically, so beautifully, so artistically, so eloquently, is one that is really worthy of not only recording, but really revisiting many times over. And I'm sure that you will be invited to give more of such talks about different aspects of raising resilient children, because you talked about the basic concepts, but of course there are many more deeper aspects to this too, and many other practical questions which I'm sure parents and families will want to raise. So thank you again so much for this excellent, exceptional presentation.